Let's face it, the past few years have been an unprecedented mess. The weight of continuous, heavy issues, burnout, fatigue, confusion, stagnance. Sound familiar? What I decided to do was to have meaningful conversations with women I admire. It's the women in my life and yours that continue to thrive through whatever it is that life throws at them. I want to know, how are they doing it? How are they getting there? And how can I glean a little bit of their wisdom? This is that, and that's what she said. To Tsandlia Van Ry.
Hi.
Yay! I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversations.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to chat with you.
Thank you.
I feel like we see each other in passing all the time, and but we've never been able to sit down and
we've sat on a couple of panels together, and so we've been peripheral.
Yes.
But now is our chance to actually speak.
Waving through the Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. So hey, welcome. You are a brand new Aboriginal education teacher at Stardust Secondary.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to hear about that. We're gonna talk about your journey a little bit before.
Yeah.
So are you from Chilliwack originally?
Yes, I am from Chilliwack. I was born here. I'm really lucky to kind of be growing up as a person in my ancestral territory. So my mom is Chilliwack. She's the granddaughter of Robert Hall, and he's the son of Gordon Hall and Blossom Hall. So we have our roots here in Chilliwack. On the other side, on my mom's side, she comes from the Kickbush family. So the Kickbush family is one of the founding families of Chilliwack as well. So I have some really neat history on both sides, and I've been able to experience that growing up here.
And I want to hear a little more about that, because one of my favorite, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things I love about you and the work that you do, but your Halkamelum is beautiful, and especially at grad ceremonies, we just had many of them. You were speaking at many, and you were just so eloquent and beautiful. Can you say something for us, just a little sentence or...
I really appreciate that. I'm definitely a student of the language, and it's something that's really important to me to kind of bring back. And our elders teach us that when we're speaking in Halkamelum, we have to speak very slowly and intentionally. Salish Wesley from my community also talks about her grandma sharing that the language is like the river, and it moves like the river, and it ebbs and flows. And so I really appreciate you saying that. It sounds good because I am trying really hard to make it sound good. So I guess I'll introduce myself in Halkamelum, and I'll say where I'm from. That's something that I've probably practiced the most.
Amazing.
So Estoel, good day. Tsandlia Telsquich, Talitza Qua Tsalhueak, Castasco Keel. At the grad ceremonies, I also mentioned which is we are guided by our elders, which is something that every week I have like a Halkamelum phrase of the week that I put up on a post-it on my door, and I try and practice that, and that was one that really stuck out for me this year. So I love observing Tsandlia's delight in doing really well and speaking Halkamelum. I mean, when I heard her speak at the grad ceremonies, it was just absolutely, practically poetic. And I love how she takes such pride in learning something, trying really hard, and being awesome at it. Definitely promote trying to learn whatever language you want to learn, but trying to diversify your language, because it carries a lot of power.
It sure does. I love that, sort of the power within the language. And well, did you study that as part of your work at UBC? Right?
I was at UFE, and then I'm at SFU now.
Oh, at SFU. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
I didn't actually study any Halkamelum while I was there. I did a undergraduate in kinesiology, so
cool.
and I didn't have any room in my electives for Halkamelum, but honestly, I think it worked out in a way that was for the best. So my first year teaching, I was working at Mount Celestia Middle School.
Oh, cool.
And the Halkomelem courses that are offered at UFE were being offered online. So I actually, and in a condensed form, so 101 and 102 were being offered in the same term online. So I was able to take both of them back to back.
Oh, cool.
And so it kind of worked out in a way where I was able to really immerse myself. I was done school-ish, and just working, and then able to study. And I took it with my sister, so that was really cool.
What was that experience like? How do you learn a language? Do you speak and listen, and what does that look like?
Well, the teacher that we had, Mary, she was really good with having us be online and still practicing, and we would start the class saying a prayer all together, and then we would go through, and she would kind of bring us all to the floor, and we would all speak at the same time, so we didn't feel too nervous about it. And then obviously having my sister in the course too as well, we were able to practice a bit more, and then I could apply it directly to my work. So there was space for me to practice it.
Yeah. I love how you said that you had the post-it note of the week or whatever, a phrase. Is that something that you bring your students in on as well?
Yes. So when in my classroom, so I don't have students that are really attached to me other than the Indigenous students in the school, but I do have a word of the week or a phrase of the week that I put up on the board,
cool.
And those that want to join in with me, I welcome them.
I love that.
But it's been a learning journey.
It's an opportunity, and I love that you're showing them that you're learning.
Yes.
And so they can choose to take part.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you mentioned a sister.
Yes.
Do you have other siblings? Do you have a large family? You mentioned, of course, the historical nature of your family.
Yes.
Let's delve back into that a little more.
So in Stalo culture, our families are massive because our first cousins are considered our brothers and sisters. So
cool.
my sister that I was referring to in my course, Jade Victor, she is a graduate of Stardust Secondary. Her mom is a professor at the University of the Fraser Valley.
Oh, cool.
And I grew up with her, and I grew up around her family, and we've gotten really close through the sports that we play together and the courses that we've taken, and so that's the sister I was referring to.
Awesome.
But I have lots of brothers and sisters. Yeah. So I have a sister and a brother from my mom, and then I have 3 brothers and sisters from my one aunt and uncle, and then another 3, and
brilliant.
So
and
a huge
you have
family.
A lot of family just around you locally.
Yes,
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I'm currently living in Skokale and surrounded by family, and that was one of the biggest things moving home because I grew up off reserve. So moving home back onto reserve, it was one of those feelings of. I'm home and I'm around my people. And
tell me about that. So you grew up off reserve.
Yes. Yeah.
Was that just a choice your family had made, or?
So obviously with the ways that colonialism has impacted our families, and everyone has different experiences and relationships with being on reserve or off reserve.
Yeah.
My mom chose to raise us off reserve.
Okay.
So it was always.
Tsandlia briefly mentions here the colonial impact, and certainly this is something that's been felt by all Indigenous peoples, but specifically with respect to her mom's choice to raise her off reserve. This was something that probably was an incredibly difficult decision at the time. There were certain incentives for leaving reserves provided by the Canadian government, all part of a very racist Indian Act. Many of those tenets in the Indian Act are still valid today. So that's a very, huge decision that was made that undoubtedly had impacts on Tsandlia's life. Yeah.
Is an option as an adult where you want to live and where you want to be. My mom always raised us to be very independent, and she let us make our own choices. And so I didn't grow up around the culture as much as I would have liked to, but I have made the choice now as an adult to kind of go back and.
Well, yeah, and even as you said a little bit earlier, the climate of today is so much. We're so much more aware of what colonialism is and who Indigenous folks are, and there was not a lot. I mean, of course, you're a lot younger than me, but I remember when I was growing up, there was a lot of non-awareness, I guess you could say.
So what did that feel like then to make the conscious decision to move to Skokow?
It had been a lot of time in the making.
Yes.
So when I was in my undergraduate, I lived in Kamloops for a big chunk of my childhood because I chose to go live with my father who was in Kamloops. And then I came back as an adult to finish my university degree here.
Oh, cool.
And I actually became a research assistant with Keith Carlson, who works very closely with the Stella people, and a lot of people in our field know who he is.
I sure do.
Yes.
His work is amazing.
So I was lucky enough to work with him on a project where we were, I was reading and kind of digitizing and itemizing the Stella oral histories. You can't itemize them, but I was putting them into a way that we could look at them and see if there was patterns in the narratives and things like that to kind of analyze them a bit deeper. And so that was actually my first real exposure to the culture. I was sitting in an archive reading oral histories and seeing family members' names and seeing different pieces of who I was in this text and going, like this is a whole part of who I am and my identity that I had no idea was really a thing. Yeah.
Wow. So when you say these...
Imagine being at a research job where you're going through archives and finding information about your own identity and family members. That must have been awesome. But I also don't want the fact to go unseen that Tsandlia put herself in that position. She had a full schedule for her kinesiology degree, but she sought out to work with Keith Carlson, who's well known for breaking down and understanding a lot of aspects of Indigenous culture. She made that happen for herself. Love that.
Oral histories is that like somebody was storytelling and someone was writing it down?
So there was a lot of ethnographers that came through our territory. Oliver Wells is a big name, Norman Lerman, and they all came through and they had conversations and they did kind of qualitative interviews with elders in our territory. Despite, there are some problems with ethno-history because those people came, they wrote, and then they left, and we know that relationships are more important.
Perspective.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they did document, and they had, there's binders in the archives of all their field notes, and they did write books, and so there are kind of these banks of information for people like me who didn't necessarily grow up with my grandparents telling me these stories. They're there. And then on the other side, Sunny McAlzee has also done a ton of work interviewing elders, and that's all on CD and tape, and so you can either listen to these stories or they're in text.
And they're in text. And Sunny is another one of our beloved local elders.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So you've been working with this information. Sort of, I guess you said digitizing, but sort of recopying,
trying to get them into a form where we could have them. I think the main intent was to have a database that was accessible on the digital world.
Yes.
So it was a really neat project to be on, and
I bet. Really and what kinds of things were on there? What kinds of information?
I guess the biggest thing that this isn't new information, obviously, for Stala peoples and the people who carry those stories. But as I was going through them, the Shwokwiyam, or the stories of Hal's journey through our territory, transforming the world into the way that we see it today. In each of the documents that I was reading through, there were bits and pieces of those stories, and one chunk here and one chunk there. And as I was kind of putting them all into a spreadsheet, I was realizing that they were all a part of this grand narrative, this story of how Hals came through the territory. And so in a roundabout way, I could have...
That is incredible. Being able to unfold a story by piecing together different bits from a digital archive. That is really cool.
Learn these things from elders in our communities that carry these Shwokwiyam. But we were able to pull them out as they were in bits and pieces in these texts, and then kind of almost put them back together. And in these texts from the ethnographers. I'm like, oh, they should be together because they are. But the ethnographers would have been hearing them from different people in different areas, and to them maybe it was just one story, one chunk, one event.
Oh, how interesting. Yeah. So it's almost like you were putting together a puzzle without necessarily even knowing what the puzzle was meant to look like.
Yeah. And there were some of the stories in some of the texts from earlier on versus the same stories in older, like texts that came more recently. We were kind of looking at the difference in language in those texts and seeing how maybe women were referred to, if women were named, and trying to look at how gender played a part, or how the influence of religion on the people in our territory, how that changed the narratives over time. And there was a change in a couple of patterns depending on how marriage protocols were referenced, or how women were referenced, if their names were referenced, or if they were Mrs. So-and-so, using their married name.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Or even conversations about, I guess, like sexual preference. There were mention of those things earlier on in texts, and then they were slowly not mentioned.
Oh, interesting.
So you're like, I wonder why, what societal influences impacted those stories.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. There was very early mention of alternative sexual preferences, of two-spirit peoples, perhaps, and Indigenous cultures from the get-go were far more accepting of these alternatives than, traditional values in colonial society have been. Fascinating.
We had lots of really good conversations that came from something that may be seemingly simple, but looking at text over time was very, very interesting.
It's such a fascinating snapshot of life, really. It's so much more than words on a page. It's life.
Yeah.
What was happening. So you've been involved in some pretty interesting projects. Did you always know you wanted to become a teacher, or how did that education piece come into it for you?
I fully did not. Teaching was not on my radar.
Oh, it wasn't.
I was doing a bachelor's of kinesiology with the intent to go to med school.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
And I was very passionate about health and wellness, and kind of promoting that within Indigenous communities. And in my undergraduate, I did kind of like a mini literature review as an elective, and looked at promoting health and wellness, and how culture and land and language can be those kind of social determinants of health for Indigenous peoples. And my intention was to go to med school, and I had applied to UBC, and so that was my deal. And I had an amazing opportunity at UFE to go, there's a program called Champions for Health Promoting Schools, and it's run by Dr. Joanna Shepard out of the kinesiology faculty School of Kinesiology.
Okay.
And she takes students from the undergraduate program who apply to go and teach physical health education in Antigua, Barbuda.
Oh, wow.
So it was a part where amazing. I had taken some courses with Jo, and I really enjoyed her classes, and I really liked her energy, and I was like, well, I want to go to Antigua. That'd be really cool.
Kidding. Yeah.
And I really liked the idea of the sustainability that she was pushing, bringing health and wellness to another country and teaching how to live healthy lifestyles, and not just kind of going for the sake of going. She's all about sustainability. So it was a program that I could really stand behind, and so I applied to go, and I went, and it kind of changed my life.
So, yeah.
Tsandlia's got this great outlook. She has her framework in her mind, what's important to her, her culture, her values, the environment. And then she, these experiences come up. Ooh, could she potentially work with Dr. Jo Shepard, who is an amazing advocate for students, by the way? I'll have to try and get her for a future interview. She has set up this program for students to go to Antigua and to provide, interesting education and pedagogy and physical education. And so Tsandlia was really interested in this, but then wanted to really bring into an environmental piece that was so meaningful to her. I love how she just flippantly says, oh yeah, so I did that. And it changed my life. Well, yeah, of course it did.
It changed your life in a way that made you go, wait a second, I don't even know if med school is what I want.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I was teaching, I was placed at, it was called the Adele School for Students with Disabilities, and Victory Center. So I was teaching students that had a diverse range of physical exceptionalities, diverse abilities, and we were teaching PE. And
this is in Antigua?
In Antigua, yeah. And it was just that experience of being with kids and helping them to kind of form their identity as a physically literate person and getting confident in their movement. And that whole process was just so fulfilling that I was like, I think I want to be a teacher. I think that'd be really cool. So I took a year off. I said, okay, I'm not going to med school. I'm going to take a year
Well, that's the power of excellent mentorship right there.
off. I worked as, I had heard through my family, because Brenda Point is the district principal of Indigenous Education.
Yeah, she sure
she's
is.
also a member of my community. So I'd heard through family, like, oh, maybe like reach out to Brenda and see if she has any jobs for you. And as it turns out, she's looking for education assistance. So I worked a year as an EA.
Oh, as an EA.
Yeah.
Oh, incredible. Okay.
And was like, yep, I think by November, I said, yep, I'm applying to teacher ed. This is what I want to do. Yeah.
You knew.
Yeah.
Isn't that, so talk to me about how that feels. Because I have these interviews and we have these plans for our lives. And then something happens and it changes.
Yeah.
What's that feeling like when you know you're going towards something that's right?
Oh, that's hard to articulate. That's a great question, though. I think it was just this like overwhelming feeling of contentment and just, this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
This is what I need to be. And when you're experiencing
overwhelming feeling of contentment. This is where I need to be. This is what I need to be.
In health education or in sports psychology, they talk about flow. When you're in a state of flow, you don't think about anything else. And every time I am in a building with students or I'm teaching, I'm in flow. And it's that space where I'm getting goosebumps talking about it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. It's just, I'm in my space. I'm my most authentic human being in that moment. And it might sound selfish, but I love it. I love it so much.
Doesn't sound selfish at all. This is what I'm talking about. This is the magic. Okay, I can't wait to hear a little bit more about your teaching career. We're going to take a short break, and we will be right back with Tsandlia Van Ry. We are back with Tsandlia Van Ry. We were having this beautiful conversation just before we took a break about this sort of transition that you experienced in your life from, well, having the dream of going to medical school to experiencing a real change and then deciding to become a teacher. You had a mentor who was really key to this. Tell me a little bit about
Dr. Shepard, Dr. Joe. She really motivated all of her students. But yeah, like I was mentioning, her energy in the classroom, you can tell that she's being her authentic self, and that really draws you in. She has got a major reputation for being beloved by her students. She is amazing. I can't say enough good things about her, and we joke all the time whenever we check in on Instagram or over text. We always joke about how she always knew I wasn't going to be a teacher from the day she met me in her first course. A doctor, yes. How I wasn't going to be a doctor. She just knew. She just knew. But every class I had with her, and we introduced ourselves. Hi, I'm Tsandlia. I'm a fourth-year kin student. I'm going to be a doctor. She just let me live that dream if I wanted it. And then after the experience at Antigua, I remember coming home from a trip to Kamloops, and I was driving over the Coke, and I called her, and I was like, Joe, I don't want to be a doctor. And she's like, I know. So what are we going to do now? And it was just kind of really funny that despite knowing and seeing, like, I think that's just a sign of a really good teacher. Like, you know who your students are and you know what they can be, but you're gonna support them on the path that they choose, and then when they come back around, and I just felt like she really supported me in my journey, and regardless of what I wanted to do. And
yes. And I know, like, I can just see
that is absolutely the sign of an amazing instructor.
That you've taken that on, and that will be the similar thing that you provide now to your
I hope so.
Students.
Oh, if I could, even just half of what she creates in the classroom, the community that she creates. That's amazing. So I've had a lot of really good teachers in my world that have positively impacted, and I think what make me so passionate about the work that I do now.
Work that you're doing now. Yeah. Absolutely. And so tell me a little bit about your new position at Sardis.
So this was kind of a position that I didn't necessarily plan on getting when I first became a teacher. I love being in the classroom. I did my practicum in grade 4 at Better Elementary.
Okay, 4th grade. So you're ready for the sort of middle school grades?
Intermediate middle is kind of where I'm comfortable. Nice. And so I was fully content on getting a classroom job and being there. And a position came up at Mount Slessy, which was my first job as an EA was at Mount Slessy. That's where I did my first kind of shadowing in my first 6 weeks. And so a job came up at Slessy to work as the Indigenous Enhancement Teacher.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I was like, oh, well, I like Indigenous content. I'm Indigenous. This sounds cool. I've been I worked in the Indigenous department before, so I know the people. And Slessy felt like home. So it felt like, I was like, okay, I can go back into that school. I can be there. So I had applied for that job and got it, and worked at Slessy for a year, and really kind of fell in love with the dynamic of the Indigenous Ed department and the work that we get to do, especially right now in where we're at in terms of awareness. We were talking about awareness earlier. It's a big push right now for these knowledges, and it kind of aligns with my journey as a person. I'm exploring who I am, and I'm exploring my identity, and this might sound cliche for the educators, but you teach who you are, and I think that's one of the first articles we read in teacher education, but I really truly believe that working in a job where you get to teach who you are, you're so much more invested in the process. And
absolutely. Yeah. And being able to recognize who you are. I know that it does sound weird, but having these authentic experiences and with mentorship that really is moving, it really matters. And so, so in your position, you won't actually be directly in a classroom, but you'll be designing curriculum? Is that...
Partially. So in the schools, working as an enhancement teacher, you're supporting the Indigenous students. You support all students in terms of Indigenous knowledges, and you support teachers in conversations around Indigenous knowledges. But it's mainly student support that really comes to the forefront, because Western institutions are Western institutions, and
that they are.
So we're essentially there to try and close that gap between home life with Indigenous students, whatever it may look like, and what is expected at school. And I really appreciate that piece of the job, because while I love school, I know that it doesn't always feel like a safe space, or it does feel like there's a big gap. So
I've heard a lot. So
this is such a valuable point, and Tsandlia is going to be such a valuable person, and she already is. There is generational trauma from residential schools across our nation, and having people in place in schools to help our Indigenous children feel comfortable, feel welcomed, that is huge.
Just in my journey, and hearing keynotes and listening to papers, or reading papers, listening to people speaking, that comfort piece that you just mentioned. So an Indigenous child's experience in a school historically has been horrible, but even to the present day, can you tell me a little bit about some of the themes that you see? What sort of discomforts, what issues do our current Indigenous students face?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it would be very similar to what I experience as an Indigenous teacher in the school. So there's another, I guess, as a person in the building, there are spaces where you feel like you can be your authentic human being, and there are some spaces where you may have to put on a different hat, put on a different mask, decide what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And I think that goes for everyone in school, but more so for Indigenous students or students that are coming from marginalized communities. There are those inequities that prevent them from, they have to think about what they're going to say. And I think it's hard for, I think as an adult, it's really hard to put ourselves in the shoes of those kids, because they might not feel safe enough to say how they're feeling. But one thing our district is doing, we're doing that equity scan, and I think we're getting so much really valuable feedback from the students in that equity scan and sharing where they see we're at.
The equity scan is something we undertake in our district, and it gives us specific measures of our Indigenous graduation rates and our non-Indigenous graduation rates, and several other measures as well.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, all of our work goes back to the kids.
Yeah.
How are, like, I can build all the curriculum I want, but if the kid tells me, Miss Van Ry, this is boring. All right, on to the next. Like, kids find things boring, of course, but at the end of the day, I am trying to make school for the kids.
Yeah, and then to create this place where they're happy, they're good, they're comfortable, they're loved.
Totally.
Now, when with your sort of intermediate students, what differences do you see in the intermediate ones? Say between them and say the really younger ones. And mostly you work with the fourth, five, six. How about a comparison between them and some of the younger students?
I think the biggest difference that I see is in the older group, they're starting to really negotiate their personalities and who they are. I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to the whole development of a child, but in school specifically, when kids are younger, they are still negotiating those personality pieces, but I find that they are more comfortable with just being who they are all the time. Then the job as a teacher in the older ages starts to become supporting kids and making sure that they can continue to be that person, even though there are those social pressures and the friend pressures and who they want to be versus who they are now or who they think they want to be. There's a lot of negotiating that's happening, and you're trying to just guide and facilitate good opportunity. And
that's such a good point. You must feel sometimes like you are trying to just sort of steer them in a good direction. Do you feel like sometimes you're trying to get them to go in a direction that they maybe just aren't going in? And if so, how do you how do you deal with that?
All adults can relate to. We think this should, like, I know from experience that if you go this way, it'll be a much better outcome, but kids will choose, at the end of the day, they will choose what they want to do, and they will learn from their choices. And I think what really, a big piece of my teaching philosophy is regardless of the choice that kid makes, I'm going to be there on the other side of that choice. So it may be the more negative choice. It may get you into a little bit of hot water, but I'll be there on the other side to facilitate the restorative and figure out how we're going to come back from it. And because, I think there's a lot of learning in those choices.
And I love that. It reminds me of the way Dr. Joe was like, of course, I know you didn't want to be a doctor, but that's cool.
I'll be there on the other side.
Right. And what aspect or what role do you think an educator should be playing in terms of seeing you on the other side? I mean, I think that's a really good way, a good framework to think about an educator.
Teachers see kids more than their parents typically during the school year.
Which is a very good point.
We see them for 6 hours a day, and I think the biggest noticeable difference that I see in my work is when a kid trusts that I'm going to be there 100% of the time, or is still not sure if I'm going to be there 100% of the time. So that relationship, that trust is the biggest part of the job, and that's why being there on the other side is so important.
No kidding.
Because then it's reinforced that, okay, no, this person, regardless of what happens, this person's going to be there for me. And I think in a day and age where kids are making new friends and shifting their alliances and meeting new people, consistency and stability is good.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we see them so much.
That's a really interesting observation I hadn't made yet, which is that in today's world, kids are, you know, so challenged with so many directions, so many social media priorities that shift all the time. So having those constant people like their teachers, their mentors, that they can really trust, you know, despite all the chaos that's happening around them all of the time. She talks about consistency, stability, being there on the other side, really making sure her students know that she's with them. Regardless of what they're doing, she's with them.
It's such a good point. 6 hours a day, you know, so many months. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of hours. Yeah. You must gain a real perspective for each student and what their, you know, what their experience is and what they bring to their place of learning.
Yeah. They, honestly, I learned so much from all of those little human beings every single day. I think that's what also drives my passion for this work. There's a colleague of mine at Sardis, Linda Zen. She, at the start of this year, this school year, she sent out she asked her students what I wish my teacher knew. And she sent out to a group of her colleagues at Sardis the answers from those kids. And it was so eye-opening and a reminder that even though these kids are little humans and just starting their journey, there are so many pieces to who they are outside of school. And that's been the biggest exciting piece of the job, is getting to know what drives them, what motivates them, what they're passionate about. It's not just them staying.
Can you see Tsandlia's curiosity and passion here? It is just a joy to witness.
Up and playing video games till 2 a.m. Some of them are going to the gym and paddling and playing soccer, and then coming to school and being role models in their communities and working. And yeah, I have some students that are in grade 10 and working 30 hours a week and going to school and
Isn't that, you see them as the people that they are, and not just the kids in your class. And I love what you said about having their own, business at work. I mean, little clubs and little, groups and things. I agree. I think that's just fascinating. And I guess I'm not seeing it from a teacher's perspective so much as that I'm seeing it from a mom's perspective. But that makes so much sense. Like, my 10-year-old has got her stuff going on. And she's got her shows and her girls and, whatever else. Being able to recognize that as a teacher must be quite a powerful thing.
I think it supports the learning relationship because I think with anybody, when you're having a conversation with someone or you're trying to teach someone something, if that relationship or that understanding that I know you're going to hear me and I'm going to hear you, if that's not there, then it doesn't matter what I'm trying to teach.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They're just, we might as well be just going
because of the other things that are going on are impacting their ability to be present in the moment. So I think having that community where all of those things are important and we don't necessarily have to leave them at the door. We can give space to them and then we can start our learning just like we do at work.
Right.
We have our colleagues, we have our coffee time, we get to rant and then we go to work, right?
Well, that's a great point. Yeah. It's such a good point. Yeah. So why don't our littles maybe need that as well? Yeah. I love that. That's recognizing that they're just little adult humans. And so how long have you been, a teacher? Now, how many years has that been?
This is my second year.
So exciting.
I'm new. I'm still, the learning curve is steep and I love it. Yeah. But I'm new and there's still so much going on and
absolutely. And tell me about some of the themes moving forward in your first few years that you're really excited to work with or work on.
So I was elementary trained. I'm working in high school now. I'm at Sardis Secondary.
Oh, interesting.
Total 180 to what I thought.
Don't you love it when life just throws you those kind of curveballs?
Like, high school, cool.
Sure.
Okay. Teenagers are a whole different ballgame. And so I kind of started looking, like I've been diving a little bit deeper into my job as an Indigenous Enhancement Teacher. I'm also working at the district as a district Indigenous Resource Teacher. Oh, cool. So that's more of the curriculum development and those pieces. So that's where the pedagogy part of my job, I'm really kind of pushing for the next few years. I really want to refine how I approach Indigenous ed based on the work that's being done by some people in the field, there's new high school grad requirements that are out now.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so there's lots of work to be done in the next few years. And so right now in my grad school, I'm at SFU.
Cool.
I'm doing a master's in equity studies and education in curriculum and policy development.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, so I'm looking at, right now I'm kind of diving a bit deeper into how, because universities have had Indigenous content requirements across Canada. Not at every university, but on some level they've had Indigenous content requirements for a number of years. So there's lots of work in the field on how that's gone, teachers' perceptions, how they've been incorporated into different faculties, things like that. Cool. So I'm kind of digging into the literature on how that's gone to maybe try and see if we can support the high school teachers in public K-12 school now who are going through Indigenous content requirements.
Oh, cool.
Now.
Wow, so you're literally doing your master's on that as you're doing it.
It's kind of working out like really, it's so cool. Like it's meant to be, honestly. And I think perceptions are still very much the same.
That's meta.
From what I understand, perceptions of teaching Indigenous, as a non-Indigenous teacher, teaching Indigenous content, it's nerve-wracking. You don't want to do it wrong. There's a lack of time. There's a lack of resources. The perceptions are very much the same as they were when the university started shifting. Okay. So if perceptions are the same, what's different that we can help use to, like, what are the strengths that we can use to help make this shift less bumpy maybe or a little bit easier, especially since at the high school level we do have Indigenous Enhancement Teachers, we do have some resources, and how as a district, at the district level, how can we support that?
That's so many valuable points there. And I would imagine, like, do all districts have that same level of support? Because I think you make a really good point there. About the sheer fear that some non-Indigenous teachers might feel.
Totally. Yep.
How do we get past that? How do we get through that?
Yeah, I think, this might sound cliche again, but relationships are so important.
It's not cliche at all. It's the truth.
I think, even speaking for myself in my own journey, there are moments when I'm exploring my own culture and I feel fear because it's unknown. When I'm in a cultural setting, when I'm in a space where I don't know the protocol, I feel nervous. I feel scared because I don't want to do it wrong.
You don't want to get it wrong.
And I can feel in the air that it's important. And we all, like, I trust that everyone feels that in the air right now. Like, this is important work. How are we going to do it? So relationships in terms of finding or building a relationship with someone that's trustworthy, that you can bounce those ideas off of and say, hey, I've been researching Indigenous storytelling. These are some of the resources I found. What do you think? And starting to have those conversations so that you don't feel like you're doing it alone and you don't feel like you're not in a safe space to have the conversation. And I think that's what we're really trying to work towards from our department, building those relationships, getting out there and talking to teachers and saying, hey, like, I'm an open space. Come have these conversations with me. Because yes, it's important for Indigenous peoples to be the voice, but we need non-Indigenous peoples to help support in the continuing and the teaching, and because there are only so few of us in the field.
Absolutely. And I think,
such great advice for those of us that are looking towards how to be better allies.
So many allies of people that want to get it right. And I'm really glad you brought that up because I think, there is just this sort of feeling of holy smokes, I really feel passionately about this, and I really want to do it in a way that doesn't exacerbate an already very tense situation. So I appreciate that. And I would imagine there are resources for teachers in that regard as well.
Yeah. So our department, any department in any school district will have people. A lot of the time, Indigenous support workers are heavily relied on. So they might be busy. They might not get back to you right away, but they do try. And
And it's just, I love that part of the system is there, and we haven't quite caught up as far as, I think, I know at the university, for example, we have elders that are so busy because everyone wants to talk to them all the time, and it's like, wait a second, that's also maybe not the solution, but but there is support, and there's I think there's a general desire to really go in that direction.
And also understanding that in Indigenous worldviews, cultural knowledge is so different and should be held to the same level as, say, myself as an Indigenous teacher who's educated in a Western institution. Even though in a Western world I'm educated and I have the credentials, I still, there are still people that know culturally a lot more than me, and they should be referred to. And reaching out to those people and holding their knowledge to the same level as my piece of paper.
Like the textbook, or yes. So really recognizing the power and the immensity of First Peoples knowledge. I love that. Oh, Tsandlia, thank you so much for coming and telling us about your work. I'm so excited to
having me.
Watch your career as you continue on this path. I can't wait to see what it looks like. And we'll have to come back again in a few years and talk about it.